Well, the royal race row's back on the front pages this morning with more details emerging about how the Dutch version of Omid Scoobie's book Endgame came to name King Charles and the Princess of Wales as the royals in question. Now, it comes amid speculation that the royals could consider legal action. Well, join me now, royal editor Russell Myers and lawyer Paula Rhone Adrien. And yeah, it's just bring us up to speed with this because there's a lot going on. It's all got very murky, hasn't it?
Yes.
Because, you know, he is absolutely, you know, the author. He's absolutely, I didn't put those names in, absolutely not, no. And then we're hearing other things, aren't we?
Well, I think, you know, if the royals thought that this would go away in a couple of days, they can think again, because it certainly isn't. I mean, Omid Scoobie had come out right in the front foot saying, I was responsible for the manuscript which was sent for the English version. I'm not responsible for the translations. And of course, the two translators who were responsible for that work in Holland have said, listen, we translated the words in front of us.
Yeah.
So one would have assumed that this was an early draft sent and there had been some sort of error made. And, you know, reading between the lines, it looks as though that will be the most likely scenario. So I'm not sure how the author or indeed the publishers can wash their hands of this because it is very, very serious indeed.
And in terms of translations as well.
Exactly.
I don't speak Dutch, but I reckon I could have probably picked out the names King Charles and Kate from that manuscript.
It's baffling. Paula, what do you think? I mean, the royals were told are looking at all sorts of options, you know, including legal action. But if there was legal action, who would that be against?
So it's quite interesting because in this circumstance, we've got a lot of hands on this manuscript.
Right.
So we've got a starting point with a draft. Then we've probably got another draft, Russell, and another draft, and another draft, and they will have all been looked at by the lawyers and all been looked at by various different editors, etc. Gone to the publishing house and no doubt gone through the processes and procedures in place. So it's quite a complicated structure that exists already. But in terms of naming a person, well, the publishing house is probably going to be very worried at the moment, Lorraine.
Yeah,
absolutely. Omid is probably going to be very worried at the moment. If it's the case that the royals decide to pursue a claim. And that's a big if, isn't it?
That is the big if, because they don't normally. They really don't. I mean, we've seen Harry has, but, you know, that's slightly different. But what would your advice be, you know, looking at this as a whole? Should they do the usual and just carry on regardless, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, in terms of a legal claim, you know, Russell and I, we were discussing this. There's been very limited circumstances when the royals have pursued a matter in the courts, but quite often it settles outside of court because nobody wants to have to go to court. There's a risk there with every court proceedings, Lorraine. And not only a risk in that you might lose, but a risk in terms of your own private information coming out into the public domain in a way that you didn't want it to. Is King Charles going to go into the witness box, Russell? Is Kate going to go into the witness box?
Precisely on that point, that the royals do not, like, normally airing their dirty linen in public, and certainly I can't see a situation where they would. But they may decide that this is something they have to take a stand on. And whilst not unprecedented, it has happened very, very few times in recent years. So they may decide that this is serious enough. I think they will look at the public's reaction to this. That has been overwhelmingly sympathetic, and people have looked at this and sort of talking about mendacious smears and very, very unfortunate that they've been dragged into this row. And I think that they will try and just sort of step away from it.
Maybe just leave it, it and not say anything
I think
at all,
so,
the
because
usual
like
kind
Paul
of thing.
says,
I suppose the key word, though, is in all of this, when we go right back to that Oprah Winfrey interview, was that Harry and Meghan, and Meghan in particular, she claimed, I believe this is right, that there was concerns, rather than curiosity, there was concerns about what colour our wee baby would be.
Yeah, the phrase she used,
and that's the thing, isn't it?
Yes.
That's different.
Was conversations and concerns. And I think the issue for Harry and Meghan is that their story has changed. You know, they may feel that it hasn't, but I suppose in the public sphere that we imagine it has. Whether it was racism, whether it was unconscious bias, they may have thought that they were not going to put these names into the public domain. But it was kind of like the sword of Damocles hanging over the royal family. And now that it is out there, perhaps Harry and Meghan are the ones to try and sort it out on behalf of the royal family.
They haven't. No. And I think, to be fair to Harry and Meghan, when this did come out 2 years ago, they never used the word racism. It was definitely us that coined the phrase. And that's because when we hear about somebody speaking about the colour of somebody's skin, an unborn child, and when we hear about the word concern, automatically we're nervous, automatically we're anxious, automatically we're concerned, aren't we? That there could be some kind of, a negative aspect feeding into that. And not only that, Lorraine, but what we've had, remember, is we have had some concerning stories about the approach of colour in the royal institution. And how Meghan was treated and how she was made to feel somewhat unwelcome. There have been stories floating around about that. So it was almost like this was another layer on top of the concerns that had been voiced in the press, etc. And I think that was the issue here. And so whether it was racism, whether it was unconscious bias, we'll never know.
No, we won't.
The issue for the Sussexes was they had any amount of time in that gap, a year or 2 years, where they could have come out and squashed the claims. And this sort of void was able to be filled.
Was that their responsibility, though, Russell?
Well, they were the ones who put it out there, I suppose. It depends what side of you fall on.
I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I often, obviously, in my day job, come across people who have made allegations against others. It's incredibly hard to do that. And you're asking somebody to make an allegation against their dad. You're asking somebody to make an allegation against the king.
And the institution at large.
And then the institution, absolutely. And so, and remember, Harry tells us a lot about fighting the institution, doesn't he? You know, coming up against that wall. And so I think it's incredibly hard for you to ask and I'm putting this very clearly in quotation marks, to ask the victim to take the lead. If the victim says, I have suffered, I just wonder how much responsibility then is placed on others around them to take a lead.
It's fascinating, and it's not going to be going anywhere. We'll be talking about this for a while, I think. I just think that I don't know, because none of us were there, but I just feel as if it's all been dealt with in a particularly ham-fisted way.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought, the royal institution would have got it wrong? But, it just feels that there's so many points where you could have just picked up the phone to one another and sorted it. And if she felt, you cannot deny that Meghan felt the way she did.
And they are her
really
feelings,
sad.
of course.
That's really sad, because she should have been able to, just if somebody somewhere had just sorted it.
And that's Russell's so right. The classic is hurt feelings. And you'd be surprised how many cases come to court and settle on the basis of an apology.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks so much.